Good morning and welcome to day 76 of F260 at First Baptist Meridian. Today we look at 1 Samuel chapters 17 and 18. And by the end of today's reading, you see that Saul is extremely jealous of David, who is the Lord's anointed to be the next king of Israel, and begins trying to take his life, something that David will not reciprocate. David will have two opportunities to take Saul's life and will refuse to lift his hand against the Lord's anointed even after the blessing had passed from Saul. So how do we get to that point? David and Goliath is a pivotal chapter. And it's one of those stories that's so familiar that we don't always pay attention to the context and details. So Israel and the Philistines, the Philistines are one of those peoples that they failed to drive out when they were coming in through the conquest. So they were a constant thorn in the side of Israel. And they're fighting at the valley of Elah. So there would have been a ridge on both sides. And rather than have all of their troops slaughtered in combat, which you often had in the ancient world, was representative combat, where each side would send out a champion. So the Philistines send out their biggest, most imposing figure, Goliath, right? And the question is, who will Israel send out? Who will be Israel's champion? You would think it would be King Saul, because why was King Saul picked as their king? Because he was a head taller than everyone else, right? He was supposed to be the impressive king, and he was supposed to rid the land of the Philistines, if you go back and read. And yet here's his time to shine. Here's his moment, his opportunity to win the support of the people. And the guy who's a head taller refuses to go on the battlefield because Goliath is a head taller or more than even Saul. And so the irony of this passage is that David, the Lord's anointed, he's the youngest and smallest of his brothers, but he's more than ready to do battle on behalf of Israel, and more importantly, on behalf of Israel's God. So often we read this as a story of odds, like Goliath had a huge advantage over David. In recent years, Malcolm Gladwell put out a book, I think around 2014, that paints a very different picture that shows David's potential advantage over Goliath. But that's not David's perspective at all. David's perspective is, hey, when I was shepherding the flocks in the field and the lion or the bear came, God would deliver the lion or the bear into my hand so that I could protect the flock. So from David's perspective, if I'm not afraid of the lion or the bear, then I'm definitely not afraid of this Philistine dog. For David, it's not about Goliath's advantage. It's not about David's advantage. For David, his motto is the battle is the Lord's. And he's going to give glory to God, and he's not going to let Goliath defy the God of Israel. So all that to say this, what's so ironic is that when David's ready to go out on the battlefield, what happens? Saul, the tall, imposing king, tries to give his armor to David. Boy, that's an indicting scene. Saul is king, but he's not acting like one. David is going to be king, and he's already acting like one. And you know how it plays out. David does slay Goliath, and because of that, his reputation and his renown grows. And the same king that was afraid to go into battle on behalf of his people becomes jealous. David has more to fear from Saul's spear than he had to fear from Goliath's spear. And so in chapter 18, you start to see, if Saul has slayed his thousands, then David has slayed his tens of thousands, and probably some hyperbole there just to show Saul, who was picked as the king because he was supposed to be this great warrior, is passed up by this humble shepherd boy from the field. Why? Because the humble shepherd boy is the man after God's own heart. His advantage is not being a head taller. It's a heart for God. And so you start to see a couple of things in chapter 18. Number one, as Saul's jealousy grows, the lengths to which he'll go to rid himself of David grow, going after his own life. Two, David has this covenant friendship with Jonathan that will come into play even after the fall of Saul's household. You see the clear contrast in character between David and Saul. Saul trying to kill David on multiple occasions, and David, when he will have the opportunity, will not lift a hand against Saul. In fact, he'll ultimately punish the people who killed Saul. And so, again, the Lord does not see things as we see things. You saw it in a reading a few days ago. We are so impressed by specimens and abilities. God knows what he's talking about when he says he looks after the heart. It doesn't matter how big Saul is. It feels like there's always a Goliath. And when there's a Goliath, you don't want someone who's a head taller. You want someone who's got a heart after God. So don't let yourself be held back today. Have a heart after God and see how he'll use that. Keep reading, keep reflecting, and keep responding to his word. And I'll see you tomorrow. God bless.